And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at CoalitionRadio.us. So like most nights, and it's my fault, not my producers, Joe's a pro, me, I'm a blabbermouth, but I want to get right to it. In what was probably going to become a two-part segment as opposed to the one-parter that we had envisioned initially, joining me for the second time is someone that I'm proud to call a friend. We've only met a couple of times very briefly, but I look forward to working with him in the ongoing fight for liberty, is Tom Arnold. Tom, welcome back to the Coalition.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate that, my friend. It's great being here with you again. There's a whole lot going on, and we've got great things to talk about to accomplish liberty in our lifetime.
Absolutely. Now, Tom and I are both members of something called the Radical Caucus. And the Radical Caucus is, my understanding after doing some research, is the oldest actual ongoing caucus, with a few brief interruptions, in the Libertarian movement. The Libertarian Party was effectively founded in the early 70s, and we refer to ourselves at the Libertarian Caucus as the Libertarian wing of the Libertarian Party. And so when we say radical, it's kind of fascinating to me, Tom, because most people consider your workaday libertarian to be pretty radical. So what does it say when we claim to be the radical libertarians? but
well,
go ahead, give us a little background.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, Pat, we're radical in the sense that, well, I like to refer to us as barbarians at the gate, right? We're not the Democrats, we're not the Republicans. Our goals are not the same as those parties, so our message as libertarians needs to be radical. David Nolan, he claimed that we had to be a radical libertarian. Yeah, so that's where we got to go.
Now, the Libertarian Party platform and the attendance statement of principles are sacred ground. If you were to take the time to watch, God forbid it's dismal, any one of the Democratic or Republican national conventions, Tom and I are old enough to remember a time when there would be floor fights over the platform, that the platform would be on live TV, that it meant something. Well, one only has to watch a convention now to understand that has been completely subsumed by the marketing of vague ideas that allegedly represent the party. And when I talk about vague ideas, these have been market tested, market approved, and that either of the two major parties really have a belief system or really stand for something. To me, the most provocative moment in that was a few years back when the Republicans were crushed by the newly emergent Barack Obama. And there were emergency meetings, and this was publicized, by the way. That's the astonishing thing about this, Tom, that these were all publicized. There was a collective beating of the breast and self-flagellation by Republicans that they had to come together and present a platform that would help them become elected and would appeal to categories that they lost so badly in Barack Obama's election. And first and foremost of that was the Hispanic community. So in a very public way, you had party leaders saying, well, we're going to get together and figure out what it's going to take to get elected by them. Now, let's think about that for a moment. Not only did they say that, they said that on live TV, and at the same time, the media seemed to think that was okay, when clearly that's bass backwards, as we say here up in Rhode Island. You should have a belief system and work on convincing people. The libertarian movement is, people are already gearing up for the floor battles for the platform for 2020. Committees have been formed, positions have been staked out, and expect real emotion, real research, real work into crafting that. There were a handful of attempts to change the platform. One of the most significant one was our good friend Sarah's success in adopting, ironically after our last guest, a platform or a statement in the platform supporting the rights of sex workers and advocating for the decriminalization of it. There were other attempts which what might have brought us further to the left. Most nefariously, though, and all credit to our secretary, there was an attempt to change something called the Statement of Principles. It changed the percentage. The Statement of Principles is so fundamental to the libertarian belief system that the only way to change the Statement of Principles is at a Libertarian National Convention, and it must be done so with a vote of 7/8, 7/8 of the voting delegates. That's how
Yes.
seriously taken. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Tom, and I want him to give us a sense of what the Statement of Principles say and what they mean.
Well, to first understand the Statement of Principles, you kind of have to understand the times that were there for libertarians. You figure, you have to understand that when the party was founded, it was founded in the midst of the Vietnam War. You had LBJ, you had Richard Nixon. LBJ, who expanded the federal government several times over, programs that have never ended, the largest since the New Deal. Then you had Richard Nixon and his drug wars, and I got to thinking about Richard Nixon and remember. Do you remember the price caps when
Yep.
When he went and he put caps on gas, and for 9 weeks he put caps on things where the prices couldn't go up. So it was government, oppression in the free market.
Mm-hmm.
And the Libertarian Party was founded during all those times. The people don't realize just how bad those times actually were. And so what we have, Pat, is we came up with a statement of principles first in '72, and then a change in that statement of principles in order to allow anarchists to be a part of the party and feel like they had some say in it in '74. And the thing that gets me the most about the statement of principles is that our philosophy, our basic philosophy. It's a political agenda, and it's also a practical application of what we can do and can accomplish in the future. Mm-hmm. So those are the three things that are most important about it. But our primary is that we're going to challenge the cult of the omnipotent state and defend the rights of the individual.
Right. That's my favorite one. I've done T-shirts with that on it. I've done business cards. That's on the back of my business card. And it's funny because a few people have said to me, well, that's a little complex. I've had people, when I've worn that T-shirt, stop and actually follow me to read the entire statement. And I know they weren't following me for my good looks. So, but what does that mean to you, as someone whose life has been vested in fighting for liberty?
Yeah, well, the thing is, the cult of omnipotent state, we see it, right? Look how big government is now, how every aspect of our life is affected by it, right? More so than when you and I were growing up. Mm-hmm. And, so it's got to be brought down. It's like I tell people, it reminds me of Wile E. Coyote. Big government is Wile E. Coyote falling off the cliff, right? Mm-hmm. And he hadn't gone poof yet. And, as libertarians, our goal is to be the road runner, right? Standing behind him and, helping him push himself off so that big government will eventually be broken up or go away.
The omnipotent state and the rights of the individual. We like to say that as libertarians, and particularly as radical libertarians, that we defend the rights of the ultimate minority. And that, of course, is the individual. Now,
that's right.
In the next statement, I'm going to read this and you tell me your reaction to this. We hold that all individuals have the right to exercise sole dominion over their own lives and have the right to live in whatever manner they choose, so long as they do not forcibly interfere with the equal rights of others to live in whatever manner they choose.
Well,
we've got a pledge like that, but what does that mean to you?
What it means to me, that's the one thing that I live by, Pat. I made a Facebook post yesterday that regardless of where we stand in this country, that's the most significant statement we can make as libertarians. We can argue pro this and or anti this, but at the end of the day, as libertarians, the that second paragraph of our statement of principles has to be the statement that we're willing to stand by. That individuals can have the sole dominion over their lives, right? People talk about sovereign individuals. Well, it's not about sovereign individuals. It's so much as it is about control of everything we want in our lives, and that's what has to be in order for us to live as libertarians.
Now, in the last segment I had, I think you caught the tail end of it.
Mm-hmm.
I had a young woman, Maya Moreno, who is a political activist, very articulate, clearly in command of the statistics and issues surrounding her political activism, and is also simultaneously an active professional sex worker. What right do we have as individuals coexisting with her to tell her that if that is her choice, she has no right to make that choice? Do we have any rights whatsoever in that?
No, sir, we don't. We don't. It's her body, her choice, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. Government, it's basically government we're talking about, Pat. You and I can disagree with her in her choice of life, right? But we don't have to. We're not going to condemn her or punish her for her choices, right? I feel there's a big issue going around now that I'm on one side of that issue, but I'm not condemning people because they're on the other side of that, right? We're getting government out of it. And that young woman who was wonderful, articulate, and a great advocate, she has the right to live her life as she chooses because she's not harming anybody, right?
Right. And the second part of the sentence is as important as the first part. We have something called the non-aggression principle here is in the Libertarian movement. And we also, when we join the Libertarian Party, we essentially swear an oath. Talk about the NAP and how important that is. It's not just enough to agree to support individual liberty, but how important is the second part of that sentence, particularly in how we govern now through so much force?
Yeah, well, look, there are things I want to say, but I'm trying to avoid hitting hot button.
Feel free, by the way. I've hit a few tonight. Feel free.
Yeah. But, the thing about it is forcibly interfering with the equal rights of others to live in whatever manner they choose. That's it, Pat. I can't force anyone to live in a way different from what I do, or live like I do. It's not my responsibility to do that. It is for each person to be responsible for themselves, right? And now there are people that we can help, who are irresponsible if we choose to do that. But we're not going to hurt people because they're irresponsible. Right. There are certain things that they would do in a libertarian society that would be reach some kind of rule of agreement, break some kind of rule of agreement. But as far as what this says in our SOP, we're not going to punish her for what she does, right, or what she says.
Because ultimately, as long as the work she's engaging is consensual, is there any harm being done to really anyone. I mean,
No, there's no harm done, Pat. You know, she has a transactional relationship, right? Just
mhm,
like any business, right? I
mhm,
have a business, and my family does, and we do transactions with people, you know, and have contracts, and you know, we fulfill those contracts, and we receive money for doing that. And she's in the same boat, you know. She's fulfilling that contract that she's made with that individual, and there you are.
right. The next line, governments throughout history have regularly operated on the opposite principle, that the state has the right to dispose of the lives of individuals and the fruits of their labor. Even within the United States,
Hmm.
all political parties other than our own grant to government the right to regulate the lives of individuals and seize the fruits of their labor without their consent.
Yeah.
Powerful, powerful stuff. Give us some examples as we uh, as we live a day-to-day life in the United
Well,
States,
you know,
how that's
the
happening.
first one obvious is taxation, right? Taxation you know, without representation because we don't have it. The whole idea of a social contract,
Hmm.
right? That you know, Did you sign a social contract, Pat?
No, I don't remember
I
that.
did. I never did. You know, they tell me that when my parents got a birth certificate for me, that they signed a social contract, or that I got a social security card, that was a social contract. But you know, it's you know, under the punishment of law, you know, there are certain things that we wind up doing. You know, even the most notable anarchist that I am personally acquainted with has to make certain acquiescence to the government.
Right.
But in a perfect world, that acquiescence wouldn't exist.
Hmm. No, and so when you look at the line opposite principle, there's a tendency
Hmm.
for Americans to project that onto other nations, other places. You know, the young lady that I just had on, family
Hmm.
escaped very dangerous criminal circumstances in the Honduras. And
Hmm.
so when, as Americans, in our kind of pattern of thinking, we think it's the other guy, that everyone else and doesn't have liberty. Yet, by most independent
Right.
assessments, the United States is not even, I believe, in the top 10 in terms of personal liberty in nations in the world. So,
Exactly.
so again, it's happening here. This is not some fictional concept that we're putting our tinfoil on in the morning and trying to project on to other people. You know, um, the way our lives are regulated now, compared to what we fought for in the American Revolution, how do you think our founders would feel if they looked at us right now, if they were with us?
Oh, you know, I think they would. Most of them would think we were foolish, you know, because you took we 13 sovereign states, sovereign countries who banded together to form a limited central government, and you know, now we have a huge central government that tramples every day on the sovereignty of the states, you know. So
Absolutely. Um, we talk about, we, on the contrary, deny the right of any government to do these things and hold that where governments exist, they must not violate the rights of any individual, namely the right to life.
mm,
Accordingly, we support the prohibition of the initiation of physical force against others, the right to liberty of speech and action. Accordingly, we oppose attempts by government to abridge the freedom of speech and press, as well as government censorship of any form. That's
hmm
the first two of three. How is it as a
the
nation,
first,
the first two of the
yeah, go
three,
ahead.
but how is it as a nation we've come to the point where when I read the opening statement about the omnipotent state, and when I say those things, those sound almost boldly revolutionary. I mean,
Yeah, they are. They are revolutionary, Pat, because it's like I said, Ovid made the statement that I'm a barbarian because no one understands my words, right? Well, the words of the founders, I see conservatives among my friends who they quote Ayn Rand, they quote George Orwell, they quote some of the same people that some of the founders issues of freedom and liberty, and they turn around, yet they're willing to give up liberty in order to have security, and that's and they allow government to use force in order to it's got a discussion today, not an argument, a discussion. It wasn't really argumentative on Iran and how Iran. That this individual was saying that he was going back 40 years to actions Iran did in the 80s as basis for our country to invade them now, right? And that the agreement that the various countries made with Iran were was broken. And I said, no, only the United States has broken that agreement, and the other countries involved in it. So we've got people in the White House and in the Defense Department who are willing to put 120,000 troops in Iran, as well as a carrier and B-52 bombers, for no actions at this present time taken against the United States.
Right.
Personally, our own sovereignty, actions they may take there are quite different than if they take an action in the Gulf. It's still not our responsibility, is it?
No, and you have individuals like John Bolton, to be specific, who, quite frankly, I'm convinced are looking for their own personal Gulf of Tonkin. If we can somehow stimulate a violent attack, then that'll justify us being quote unquote preemptive, and that'll justify us ultimately grabbing, again, using coercion and force to grab the property of others. What's that simple saying? Don't take other people's and break other people's stuff. I mean, that's very often it really just comes down to that.
Yeah, exactly right.
The right to property, and this is possibly the most contentious right now, because our government clearly believes that in their morality, that if we betray their definition of morality, then they have the right to confiscate private property. Do they have the right to confiscate private property?
No, they don't. And, I mean, they do by their rules, unfortunately. But, I think the basis of our being as libertarians, David Nolan said that the most important principle for libertarians is the principle of self-ownership, as set forth in the preamble and the statement of principles. You see, self-ownership, that's our property. We're our property. And the government wants to control not only our physical property, but our very beings. And, I made a comment on a friend's Facebook post last night that, you think the Taliban is bad for, implementing Sharia? Well, here's the state of Alabama. Hold my beer.
Yeah.
Because, it's what the state of Alabama did yesterday. Is that any more manipulative of every facet of a person's life, than what
now,
they claim Sharia law would be?
Yeah, no, it's astonishing, because these very same people are the first to drape themselves in the American Constitution and the American flag. Yet at the same
Yeah.
time, I believe are criminally violating the Bill of Rights in not only in its writings but in its spirit. You know, I
You're
think
right.
I think of the SOP as sort of our Bill of Rights, our Declaration of
Yep.
Independence, all
Yep.
kind of wrapped up in one.
Yep, I agree with you.
Since governments, when instituted, must not violate individual rights, we oppose all interference by government in the areas of voluntary and contractual relations amongst individuals. People should not be forced to sacrifice lives and property for the benefit of others. They should be left free by government to deal with one another and free traders, and the resultant economic system, the only one compatible with the protection of individual rights, is the free market. All over the place. We just passed a law in Rhode Island, that kind of one of these stealth laws, which created a $49 million investment fund for small businesses to be run by the Commerce Corporation of the great state of Rhode Island. Now, for purposes of tonight's conversation, we'll ignore the past, let's just say, performance of said organization, which has been an abject failure. But doesn't that perfectly illustrate this point? You are using the coercive nature of taxation to effectively engage in redistribution of property. Yet, amongst your friends who possibly support the current president, who maybe not, if you were to say that, how do you feel about people who use force to redistribute property? What would they say normally?
Yeah, well, depends on, my conservative friends seem to go along with it. In Tennessee, we have a super duper majority of Republicans in our state legislature. And, we have two big projects. One that they spent, over $900 million for 3,000 jobs in $900 million in benefits of all types for Volkswagen to come to Chattanooga. Then we have a industrial park on the Tennessee River at the juncture of the Mississippi and the Tennessee, or down there somewhere in that area, that we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on, and there's not a single structure been built there yet. See, they took the property, they built, put in roads and divided things up, and put in a water system, and put in, septic system and electric and all this. The state did, and in the 7 to 10 years since it's existed, nothing has happened there.
Right.
No one wants to come there. You see, it'd been better off letting private enterprise pick their own, place to put their own business, right? And then work that out between other property owners.
Right. We don't need government to take our property and give it back to us in an adulterated, often filtered form. People engage in consensual business relationships. That's if you notice, that's the theme for tonight. All the time, without government, profits are made, lives are enhanced, people are hired, wealth is created, innovation takes place.
Yep.
All
Right.
because people engaged in mutually beneficial, consensual relationships. And isn't
Right.
that really the core of our outlook on life?
Yeah, sure. It's supposed to be. I look at my dad as a perfect example of someone who saw a niche in the construction world, right? Who made that niche into built that niche into a very solid business over a period of years, and did so without, handouts, from somebody else,
Right.
and that's the way that we're supposed to operate, right?
Unfortunately, I've only got 2 or 3 minutes left, but what I'd like to close on, what is the Libertarian Party Radical Caucus's role or job, if you will, when it comes to the statement of principles? Why do we feel like we need to exist in addition to the Libertarian Party? What role do we fill?
Well, okay, what role we fill is 4 points, Pat. One is our rights are utilitarian. You know, the central commitment of the Libertarian Party should always be individual liberty. That there is no essential separation between rights and the utilitarianism, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is, the morally correct choice will always yield the most benefit to the greatest number of people, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Number two is radical abolitionism, right? We as libertarians, you know, people talk about, well, what would you take down first, right? Well, as radical libertarians, it doesn't matter what comes down first, right? Whether it's the Department of Education, the Federal Reserve, or any of those things, there's nothing. We want all of that that's gone, right?
Right.
There's no step by step process of how we will do that, right? And the more we can get rid of, the better off we are. You know, we also believe in parental populism, and that the Libertarian Party should be a mass participation party, operating in the electoral arena and elsewhere, devoted to consistent libertarian principle, mm-hmm. and committed to liberty and justice for all. The Libertarian Party should trust in and rely on individuals to welcome a program of liberty and justice, and should always aim to convince people of the soundness of libertarian principle. You know, and then finally, no particular order. You know, let's just, whatever harmful policy is out there, let's just get rid of it, right?
Right.
And there's no, you know, it's just, it's like I said, it's pushing Wile E. Coyote off the cliff, waiting for him to go poof when he hits the ground, right?
Right.
And you know, and that's it.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. Let's do this again in a couple of weeks. We're going to be
we'll do it, Pat.
Two of the I got to say, two of the older members, if you will, of the libertarian movement. I think I really enjoy talking to you, and I what I want to do is essentially over time bring people back to their libertarian roots. A lot of confusion out there right now. We're not here. We don't sit in judgment of anyone, but I think our goal is to simply bring us back to our roots and have conversations with people and foster understanding of what, not that one individual is more libertarian than the other, but simply come to an understanding of what being libertarian really means.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And if we can do that in the run up to 2020, you and I will accomplish a whole hell of a lot.
That's right.
God bless you, lad. Tom Arnold.
Thank you, my buddy.
A warrior, if you will, for not just libertarianism, but radical libertarian, joining us tonight. And we talked about the statement of principles. Thanks for joining me again, bud. I really appreciate it. Well, that brings us to a close tonight. We are the coalition, loud and proud. As always, we stand outrage porn free. As always, we are civilly disobedient. As always, we broadcast on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network. Take a moment, if you hear this now in the coming days or weeks, like us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_Radio. Feel free to reach out to us, check us out. As we start to approach election time, if you're a libertarian candidate and you'd like to spend a little bit of time on the air, these are a friendly place to get used to being on the media. We call ourselves kind of the AAA here. Come on, tell us not just you should get elected, but tell us why you should. Bring us up to date on local issues. And it's in the support for the grassroots element of the Libertarian Party that will grow and actually, in mine and Tom's lifetime, defeat the omnipotent state. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Friday.